Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next family chat. Today, we are going to be talking about Voting 101. My name is Caroline Davis, and I'm the Graduate Assistant for Transition Programs, and I oversee the family chats as well as our monthly family newsletter. And today, we have Erin Williamson, who is an Assistant Director of the Office of Student Leadership and Engagement, and Hannah Horowitz, who is a current UNCW student, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
You'll go first, Hannah?
Yeah, sure. So hello, as she said, my name is Hannah Horowitz. I am currently the Campus Election Engagement Project Fellow that's working with the Office of Student Leadership and Engagement.
Hi, everybody. My name is Erin. I work in the Office of Student Leadership and Engagement on campus, as you all heard. My role, I like to say, is we want to get students connected to what it means to be a leader on campus, and also get more connected to their community and learn how they kind of stay connected in that way. So election engagement is part of my role. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so in case you haven't heard, we have an election coming up. And so we're going to be talking about voting, the processes, what looks different this year, and also having conversations with your student. Before we jump in, if you have any questions, I encourage you to comment those, and then we'll either answer them in the comments or on air. And also, if we say OSLE, that's the Office of Student Leadership and Engagement, and that is the abbreviated version. So if we do say that, we're talking about the same office. So my first question for y'all is, why is it important for students to vote and get involved with politics?
So it affects everyone's future. It affects, especially if you're a student, it affects your future. So you want to be part of that. Because if you aren't part of that, then somebody is ultimately making a decision for you.
Yeah, and I think from my professional perspective, we talk with students a lot about how ultimately being a responsible, engaged citizen in your community, whether that's a local community or a more global community, part of that is paying attention to the democratic process and being engaged with who are your public leaders, what is their background, understanding them, because they have such a large influence over our day-to-day things that affect us. So from our perspective, it's not just about a presidential election every 4 years. It's about an ongoing awareness of the people who are going to affect your community and participating in the process to select the people that truly represent what your community needs, for sure.
Awesome. And I know I personally, whenever I'm wanting to research candidates and look things up, it can be really hard to find good, factual, non-biased information and avoid that fake news that none of us want to find. So if you had any suggestions on good sources for people to research candidates and platforms and things like that, what would you recommend?
So like you said, always pay attention to nonpartisan outlets. Those are most likely going to have the most accurate information. I know at SEEP, we have really good nonpartisan candidate guides that kind of show the main issues and what those candidates stand for. I know they're up on our website for both the Senate and the presidential race. So a good nonpartisan outlet that I like to use is Associated Press. Another one is called The Conversation. And then 538 is also, some people say it leans left, but that's a really good, it's good for polls. So if you're looking up the most accurate polls. And then my last thing is always avoid op-eds, opinion pieces, always avoid those, because those are going to have just people's opinions in them, and they're not really going to be based solely on facts.
Yeah, and I would offer on top of that, I know I'm guilty of, maybe you're scrolling through your feed on Facebook or Instagram or, some sort of social media outlet. I think it's okay to, look at a resource or check out something that someone is sharing. I think you just want to be very critical all the time of what it is that you're looking at. So if someone shares something that you haven't heard, or it's opposite of some news that you have heard about a candidate, just pay attention to who wrote that article or what is the news source. Check it against another news source. I think a big tip I would offer is that you never want to be somebody who gets all of your news about your candidates or your information about your candidates from a single source. I will own I'm a huge NPR lover. so I listen and read a lot about NPR, but I need to make sure that that's not the only place I'm getting my information. And so that's a good way to kind of do a pulse check. If it's similar message on lots of platforms, it helps you know that it's, a similar story. If you can't find something else that echoes what you're reading, then that's a good way to know, like, maybe I should be suspect of this information, or just continue researching to find. So definitely agree on the nonpartisan, but also really trying to look at multiple sources and to check sources against each other is a good tool to help with that.
Yeah, for sure. That even for me, I can be guilty about just seeing it once somewhere and assuming that's true. And that's definitely not always the case.
Absolutely.
Those are some really great suggestions.
Absolutely.
So then once people figure out who they agree with, who they're thinking about, then it shifts to talking about getting registered to vote, which is a big step, especially for students that are recently turning 18 or they're getting to that age where they can now register. What does the process look like for students that are in Wilmington but not from Wilmington, and just overall registration process?
So firstly, the deadline for registration, if you're planning on voting absentee, has already passed. But you can register and vote at early voting places in North Carolina. The second question that you want to ask yourself is, do you want to vote in person? Because that is really going to be based on how you vote. If yes, you have to make sure that the registration, your registration is in the county that you plan to vote in. But if not, you can vote absentee, but you have to request an absentee ballot. And that has to be returned before election day. It also has to be postmarked on election day. And it would come from the county that you are registered in to be counted in that county.
Yeah, it definitely, I think, is a struggle for our students in particular this semester, because we've had so much fluctuation about, maybe you moved to Wilmington and then you moved home, or you're still here, or even our students who, their license might still say that they are from another county, but they're a sophomore, junior here, they live off campus. The questions that Hannah was saying are really your first questions, is where do you want your vote counted? Because your registration needs to match that. The other thing I'll share that's really helpful for our students is just to understand that, especially for our first year students, if you're living on campus and it's such a transitional time, you're only there for a year, or even if it's your second year and you're still living on campus, your residential address on campus meets that residency requirement to vote in New Hanover County. So the concern about, I live in Pelican Hall, but my license says, I'm still from, I don't know, Mecklenburg County, right? You living on campus meets that residency requirement. So you can register here with that address. If you miss registration, you can head to early voting at one of our early sites here in town and register and vote in one visit. I think the big key, though, is just knowing that registration first is required to take advantage of a mail-in ballot, and the registration is required to show up on election day. So it's really tricky understanding with the registration piece that you want to do it early, but if you missed it, early voting is where you need to be headed. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, it is, for sure.
Good.
And if we have anyone that's just now joining us, if you have any questions that you would like for us to either answer in the comments or live, feel free to comment those on the video and we will definitely get an answer to you. And then so now we've registered, we're ready to vote.
Right.
What are the different options for voting this year?
So I would honestly just go ahead and say early voting right now. If you have not registered early voting, I want to emphasize that. So that's kind of like one of your, I don't want to say last chance because that sounds scary, but it really is. And if you are registered, you can request an absentee ballot if, say, maybe you don't feel safe going to the polls. But I know that they're trying their best to make sure that everything is safe. And yes, so when it comes to absentee ballot, that you have to request it by October 27th. And it has to be postmarked, like I said, by election day. And you send it in, and yes.
Yeah, so I think the options you're talking about, Caroline, kind of go off the question that Hannah asked earlier is, do you want to vote in person? Because that impacts your options. If the answer to that is no, then it needs to be absentee, which you need to be registered. You got to request it by a certain date, and then you got to get it in by a certain date. But if you're open to registering in person, everything we're hearing from our local board of elections is that they're taking every measure possible to make sure that that is safe. But we all need to do what's good for us, right? If you are open to voting in person, it kind of expands your options. That's where the early voting comes in, which starts today, actually, October 15th. And
Perfect
then,
timing.
yeah, exactly. Perfect timing. And then, of course, election day. It's just knowing the difference between what you can do during early voting and what you can't do at physical election day. So yeah, so their options right now are absentee, early voting, election day. So it's just about kind of knowing the difference between each one and what fits your needs for sure.
And then for early voting, are there multiple polling place options for students, or do they have to go to their assigned polling place for early voting?
Yeah, that's a great question. Hannah, do you want to answer that? Or you want me to answer that?
You can answer it.
That is a great question, because I think it's a common question too for any of our students living on campus, or maybe our students who they're a sophomore, junior, senior, even if they remember seeing a polling place on campus. That's really helpful. So know that during our early voting, the closest site to campus is our local board of elections. There are multiple sites around town. And the cool part about early voting is you can show up to any one of those during the hours that they're open, and you can register, check your registration, get your poll, or get your ballot all, set and what you need to do. The difference is if you're going to vote on election day, November 3rd, you have to go to your polling place, especially just to make sure that your ballot is counted. It also creates extra work for our poll workers. If you show up to the wrong place, they give you submit something called a provisional ballot, which basically means they have to check it after. And so if you just want to ensure that like my vote is counted, there's no reason it could be thrown out on a technicality or anything like that, and it does happen, is to make sure you're going to the right polling place. Or honestly, early voting, we're promoting it so much because of the ease of access, the convenience, the lines are shorter, but also the data has shown that the highest percentage of ballots are counted and secured at early voting, because you have the time to really check everything. The poll workers are ensuring that you are putting it in the way you need to put it. Your registration is checked. So yes, great question. Early voting, lots of locations. You can go to any of them. Election day, you have to go to your polling place.
Yeah, and to add on to that really quickly, you can check your voter to check your polling location. You can use the North Carolina State Board of Elections voter registration lookup. If you just Google that, it should come up, maybe the first or the second link. You just type in your first and last name, and it will show you your polling place.
Yeah, that's helpful.
And then, so there's a bunch of different ways to be able to vote this year. So what are your personal voting plans?
Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead? Or
no, you have, I think, the exciting news, Hannah. You should.
Yes. So I voted by absentee. So this is my first time voting in a general election.
Yeah.
Yay. So I voted absentee a couple weeks ago. It was a really easy process. We requested them, I want to say maybe August. So we were just really excited to request one. I got that like in September, filled it out, got my witness signature, sent it back. I was able to use something called ballot tracks. And that is, it tells you when your ballot is coming to you, tells you when it's been received by mail, and then when it gets back to your Board of Elections.
So you got the absentee ballot and mailed it back in. Okay.
That's exciting. First time voting in general. That's so exciting. That's an exciting day. My plan's a little different. I really enjoy the active voting, and I'm feeling, at least right now, I'm feeling comfortable going in person with my mask and hand sanitized, all those things. So my plan is actually go tomorrow. I'm kind of, yeah, exactly. This is a perfect one with the that you got from SEAT. My plans go tomorrow, use my lunch break to head to one of the early voting sites. There's one right by campus at our local Board of Elections office. And I'm very curious if the second day of voting, the line might be a little bit longer. So that's why I'm going early in case I get there and I think, oh my gosh, I only have an hour on my lunch break. I'm not gonna be able to do this. Then I still have time to make a secondary plan tomorrow. But the other thing I'll share with our voting plan is we both, I know I have, and Hannah, I remember you talking about this, looked at our sample ballot. So it's something else that's really helpful for folks. The same voter search that Hannah talked about in your profile, where it tells you where your polling place is, it gives you here's what your ballot will say. It's called your sample ballot. And so you can print and look at who's going to be on there. So you can actually look up names and different roles and titles if you didn't know that certain people are going to be on your ballot. So you can feel more prepared.
Awesome. And then it's funny because my plan is also different than both of y'all's.
Yeah.
I requested an absentee ballot and then I took it in person
Love
to
that. Yeah.
the County Board of Elections. The request, the process, everything was super easy.
So
Everyone was
easy.
really
Yeah.
helpful.
Yes.
I had a great time. I felt safe. They are very careful about their numbers. And so I am super excited that I've also already voted for this election.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that we all have 3 different plans. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then we actually have a question from a parent, and they have an off-campus student, and they're wondering what their student needs to take with them when they go vote.
That's a great question. Hannah, do you want me to take that? Or do you want to answer?
I honestly am just thinking your mask.
Yeah.
But you can go ahead and answer that one.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the first question the student should consider is, am I registered? And that's where that the voter search, the North Carolina voter search that Hannah was talking about, that's the first step before you even go vote. Am I registered? Where is my polling place? And that's important if you're going on election day. If you're going to early voting and you are registered, mask. You don't have to have an ID. That is not required right now in North Carolina. It has been in the past, so there's some confusion, but right now you do not have to have an ID. If you are registered, you're going to early voting, you got your sample ballot, you're ready, you just show up and do your thing, right? Mask, maybe sanitize before you go in, do what you need to do. If you are not registered and you want to go to early voting to register, there are several things I would take with you in addition to your mask and all the things you need to do to be safe. Being a student, I would take your student ID, your state issued ID, right? So if it's a license, or if you don't have a driver's license, you have like a state issued ID, something that's going to show your local residence. And I know a lot of our off-campus students, their ID still might reflect their home address. So maybe bring like a residence, what am I trying to say? A bill, right? Even if you print it like your water bill, right? If you print it online, or if you get the physical bill to your address, that will show your name associated with this local address. Because living off campus is just a bit different than living on campus. On campus, you could say, oh, I live in Pelican Hall, and it kind of meets that requirement. But off campus, because it's a residence not associated with campus, it's a little different. If you want to be super safe, I always bring my ID. Sometimes I'll have a bill ready to go in case there's a discrepancy I didn't know. But a lot of what to bring depends on, am I registered? And to double check that before you go.
I say, and personally, I've been registered in 2 different counties, neither of which were where I'm from, and I've not had any issues. So you should be squared away with that.
Yeah, that's a great question, though. Great question.
So to shift the topic just a little bit, we know that when students come to college, they start to get asked questions they may have never been asked before, start to think about things they may have never thought before. And then their ideas about the world and political views might start to shift a little bit. And so if that does happen and it starts shifting away from like how their family views things like that, what advice do you have for families on how to have those conversations in a meaningful way?
Yeah, so I've seen this a lot with some of my friends. They come from towns, they go to college, and they meet new people, they have new experiences, and their worldview changes, and that's completely normal. The first thing I would say is that having a continuous and civil dialogue is very important. It's really easy to just write off the other's opinion that's just like wrong because maybe you don't believe that. And we've been seeing a lot of that because it's not easy nowadays to sit down with somebody and really talk about, this is why I believe this, and here is why I'm going to back this up. So students I feel like when students sometimes talk to their parents, there's this whole dialogue about, I didn't raise you this way. This is not how you should be thinking. I feel like that's going to put students on the defense, and it's also going to put parents on the defense. So kind of prodding your student, why do you believe this, without being confrontational, that's going to help a lot with having that civil dialogue, which is important.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I'll share from an educator perspective. In addition to my role in the OSLE, I also teach some of our first year students through their university seminar class. And I would just share that I think one of our goals as educators is to help our students really ask themselves why they think the things they think. And not in a bad way, but just to really ask yourself, where does that come from? Do you still think that way? Take in new information and compare it to what you knew. Do you want to change your opinion? It's really about the exploration process so that their thoughts are their own. And that is no slight to how they were raised, or, conversations within families. I think it's just more about them learning to critically think, right? And to interrogate is a word I like to use, like interrogate your own opinions and thoughts, because then it helps you know for sure, I feel this way because of X. And even if students are exploring new ideas because of class conversations and they're meeting new people with different experiences, a year from now, they might go back to how they were feeling before, but this is a time where they're exploring and maybe opening themselves up to question what they feel. I definitely would echo what Hannah was saying, is there's so much to be gained, and shared when that why question is explored. Or like, I like the what makes you think that, or what experiences have you had that have kind of influenced, your new direction and how you're thinking. I think leaving things open help preserve a really great relationship that I imagine a lot of our families have with their students, and I bet they would like to keep. So I think Hannah's got some good tips, and I would just share from an educator, they're doing what we want them to do. It's to question and to confirm their thoughts by exploring other things.
And also patience, for sure. I know that my parents and we definitely have disagreements on things. And I know there's been conversations that I was the reason that they started going south. And then there's been conversations where they've been the reason where it started going south. And no one's perfect. And these conversations can get emotional and heavy. And so just patience. We know that you love your student at the end of the day, and your student loves you at the end of the day. And that's what matters.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
That is all the questions that we have planned. Unless there's anything else that you want to add that hasn't been covered, we can start to wrap it up.
I will share that something we talk a lot about in OSLE is that your engagement as a citizen does not end when you submit your ballot. So I would just continue to explore ways to be active. There's so many ways to do that through fundraising, philanthropy, community involvement through volunteering, but also so much of what we're seeing around protesting and petitions and making your voice heard around issues that you really care about. That is engagement as well. So I just would echo for all of our family members in your own communities, would love to see that engagement for our students beyond just voting, to kind of match that involvement. So, and we can help with that in OSLE in a lot of different ways. So hopefully we'll get to see some of your students. That would be wonderful.
Yes, I agree with that completely. To students, like, you don't have to be a foreign policy expert to be involved in politics. So you don't have to know everything about what's going on. Of course, I think it's important to be keeping up with your with the news and with unbiased sources, because I see that a lot in college. Like, I will be having a conversation with somebody and I'll be like, did you hear about this? And they're like, no, I didn't hear about that. So we'll be able to kind of educate each other. And that goes back to educating your friends. Like, keep talking about how you guys can stay involved in politics. Like Erin said, after the election is over, because it's not going to end. This is not going to end. It's going to be constant and ongoing. The world is constantly changing, and you have a right to be part of that.
Awesome. Great piece of advice. I just want to thank you both so much again for joining us. I was really looking forward to this one, and y'all provided so much great information on something that is so important and so soon. Like you said, early voting started today. The election is on November 3rd. So everyone make sure that you get out and vote. And again, thank you both so much. If you would like to sign up for our family newsletter, you can go to uncw.edu/transitions, and then you'll click on family programs and then family resources, and there will be a link for you to sign up for that. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and we're at UNCW Transitions. And if you joined us late or missed the video, they stay on our Facebook, and we also publish them to our YouTube pages. And thank you so much for your questions and thoughts. And please reach out to our office if you need anything else, and we will see you next month. Thank you so much.
I was muted. Thank y'all.